Hi there, welcome to this lesson on rhythm and meter. We're listening to I Got Rhythm, which is played here by Don Bias. Let's go ahead and get started with the lesson. Okay, in the 20th century, composers wanted to experiment with things, and so one of the things they decided to experiment with was meter. Instead of using 4/4, 3/4, 6/8, those standard meter types, they started to try and use asymmetric meters, for example, using groupings of 2s and 3s that created a consistent pattern of irregularity. So, for example, 5/8 can be 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3, or 3 plus 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2, creating that irregular beat. 7/8 can be divided in various ways: 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2, or maybe 3 plus 2 plus 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. So all different groupings of 2s and 3s, but irregular. Another technique is to use a composite meter that spells out what those smaller groupings are. So, for example, 3 plus 2 plus 3 would be a type of 8/8, which 8/8 would normally be something regular, but if we divide it in this way, it becomes irregular. 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2, just like that. Very common technique is to use changing meter, which is rapid change of time signatures, frequent change, instead of staying in one meter for very long. Another thing you might see is alternating meter. For example, 2/4 3/4, which generally would would have a measure of 2/4, then a measure of 3/4. So it's a kind of regular irregularity. 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2. And less common is fractional meter, which has partial beats, so something like 2.5/4 or 3.58. If I were to do 2.5/4, I might think of it in terms of eighth notes, and it would be similar to 5/8 notes rather than 2.5 quarter notes. But sometimes it's notated fractionally like this. So you can use irregular meters, or another approach is to use conflicting meters. So metric dissonance means that there's two metric patterns that conflict with each other, that are dissonant with each other. We can create a metric pattern that conflicts with the prevailing meter with displaced accents that are consistently placed to suggest a potential secondary meter. And we sometimes call this second meter, the shadow meter. Polymeter then suggests that there are two concurrently operating meters. So we have two metric patterns coexisting. They can be written out separately. There can be two voices with two different time signatures. Or this polymeter can be applied again through accent patterns or some other means. So we feel two voices moving in two different meters at the same time, polymeter. Another thing that happens in 20th century music is metric modulation. And this is a method of changing the tempo by equating a particular note value with a different note value in the previous bar. So you could take an eighth note in one meter and make it a dotted eighth note, or make it a quarter note in the next meter, and that changes the tempo. This is easier to demonstrate than it is to describe here. But metric modulation is a means of changing from one tempo to another by means of meter. Another thing you can experiment with is rhythm. For example, polyrhythms is when you divide a beat in different ways, such as 2 against 3, which is a very common one, or divided into 5 against 7 or 13 against 9. Those cross rhythms don't line up with each other, so polyrhythm. Messiaen did something that we call non-retrogradable rhythms. These rhythms would sound the same if they were played forwards or backwards. So, yeah, they're just kind of he means non-retrogradable because if you turn them backwards, they sound the same. And other composers used additive and subtractive rhythmic processes. So if you take a rhythmic pattern like I'm taking that same pattern and I'm adding something to the end of it each time. So that's an additive process where the rhythm is expanding. You can also do a subtractive process. Lastly, you can have music that doesn't convey a sense of meter at all. This is sometimes desired. So the focus is on the rhythms or on other aspects of the music. If it doesn't convey meter, we would call that ametric. Okay, so there's some terminology that you can use to describe various approaches to rhythm and meter in 20th century music, and we will look at some more examples in class, and there is a quiz that follows right